You're watching The Art of Meal Prep by Dr. Lissa Gall on Resonance Wellness TV, part of our Whole Life Medicine Alleviate series. Keep in the loop about future webinars and events on whole-life-medicine.com. So welcome everyone to this webinar on the art of meal prep. I know that all of my patients are very busy people, as am I, and the topic of meal prep hits many buttons for us all in terms of time, money, and probably most importantly, health. Our lecture on meal prep today comes under Alleviate from the Whole Life Medicine model, which is the first step in health strategy at Resonance Wellness. And Alleviate is the first step in my approach to patient guidance. So when we talk about feeding ourselves, we are talking about the starting points of Alleviate in the WLM model. In short, there's three considerations when we're looking at strategies to resolve a health issue in Alleviate. The first is to consider what the root causes are in our health situation and ask ourselves, what's the setup? So diet is a chief lifestyle intervention in any natural health plan for both prevention and treatment of disease. And so when we make changes to diet, we really affect how things are set to operate biologically. The second is to look at the state of the tissues involved. In the clean slate process, we look at how to improve the cleaning up of the tissues that gets bogged down in disease processes. And with dietary intervention, you're going to see improved maintenance of body tissues and much better tissue cleanup. Lastly, the diet is the best place to obtain missing ingredients for all metabolic and repair in your body. And so the quality and nature of what you're eating plays a huge role. With those thoughts in mind, problem-specific programs for particular chronic conditions can be created alongside of that. And so that pretty much sums it up. And so diet is obviously a very major part of Alleviate. So obviously you're all here today to start the process of getting better at meal prep, and that is totally worth it. So let's look at some of the reasons behind why getting good at meal prep can help you make your diet and your life better. Meal prep has a ton of benefits, and it's pretty much accessible to anyone, and it can be quite delicious. The concept is to learn how to best manage the food that comes into your house and make more meals or components of meals in advance so that you're limiting the amount of time you have to think about cooking and actually cooking throughout the week. Meal prep really serves people who are maybe not the most natural cooks and those who kind of find it a chore, and it speeds up processes for people who actually don't mind the cooking. So remember as we go along that you don't need to do all of these meal prep things all the time to be successful at keeping your dinner menu rolling. And perfection is the enemy of done. So just because you're not going to figure out everything this week doesn't mean you can't try a suggestion or two to see how things go. So let's look at why we might want to do some meal prep, some good justifications to get into our minds. So what's the one thing you can never get back? I would argue time. Time is the thing you can't get back. And it's really hard to justify spending a lot of time every night making dinner, especially when you've worked all day and you just want some downtime. It can make the whole process of meals seem like one more chore. And meal prepping does take some time. It will probably take more time at first as you get the hang of it. But prevention of time wasting is a key factor here. So instead of spending your time trying to decide what you're going to make for dinner or running to the store for ingredients and cooking and cleaning up after, you could have the components organized or already made. And you might be thinking that that's probably when you'd be choosing to go out to eat instead. However, considering the time you're going to spend choosing where you're eating and ordering or waiting for it to be served, eating it and driving home, that time is also significantly longer than opening up your fridge and eating some food you've already at least partially prepared and know that you already love, and then just having the rest of your night to relax. So most food preppers will take a block of time during their, probably during the weekend to prepare for their whole week. I guess it depends a little bit on how you set your week up. But you can pick a day and dedicate a few hours to figuring this out. Whether it's your weekly shopping or the actual prep cooking part. Prepare as you please and then store your items in the refrigerator or freezer and you'll be all set. And basically you gain more time throughout your week and you preserve your energy too, which is also important. So, as I think you probably have saw in some of our social media posts, for the first time in history, Canadians and Americans are spending considerably more money at restaurants than they do on groceries. This is particularly true in the last 2 decades. But cooking at home and buying things in bulk saves you a significant amount of money off your food expenses. And the intention behind meal prepping is to have food readily organized for usually about 3 to 5 days. And if you plan this way, you'll be buying larger quantities of things, usually at a better price. And almost everything has a price scale that benefits the person that buys in bulk. You can also learn to recognize the loss leaders of a grocery store that you like if you get the ads for that store coming to your house. A loss leader is an advertised product that a store sells at below cost, usually as a like front page printed ad. And the reason why they do that is they know that if you come shopping for the loss leader, you buy much more stuff on your way out. So most of the time, that's why it's called loss leader. They're actually losing money or not making any money on that item or minimal margin. And it's to attract people in. And a lot of the time it'll be common things that people use lots of. Like it won't be something rare that'll be the loss leader. It'll be, they have a sale on some kind of meat or vegetable or the fruit that everybody, has in season. So this is a way, though, if you can manage it without buying much more stuff on your way out, you can actually save a lot of money that way. And once you get into the habit of meal prepping, you're going to begin to recognize the staples that are essential for you to keep around. For example, you might want to stock up on olive oil or brown rice or beans that you like on sale. And it's really easy to do that if you just keep a little bit of your eyeballs peeled for what's going on sale. Now, a lot about meal prep can really, like nowadays, we have some really great grocery shopping secrets. And I might have spoken to at least some of you who are my patients about this. Obviously, you don't want to go grocery shopping hungry and unprepared. Actually, I found hungry men are the worst to shop with. I don't know if that applies to you, Neil. But a hungry kid ain't great either. So without a plan for your week, you're way more likely to make impulse purchases that you otherwise wouldn't have. And I mean, I have to restrain myself from buying things that just look good, and I definitely know better. But directing your grocery shopping makes it more productive, takes less time, and saves you money. So in my life, I have several sources for grocery. And in general, I endeavor, obviously, to eat as much organically grown food as possible. I have a share in a community-supported agriculture biodynamic farm north of town called Blue Mountain, where I get a ton of vegetables through the summer and fall, and an egg share, and also usually a chicken or meat share. And you can get organic boxes through the year from Spud or Fresh, and this carries on the same theme. Plus, you can order some extra stuff into your boxes that are natural foods, and this kind of starts to help you think about buying in season and getting things more in bulk. I love to shop at natural food stores, but I have to say I've often found them crowded and pretty expensive, and they're not often designed really for bulk buying, which they used to be a lot more than they are now, and I think they really should be in my humble opinion. But I also shop local grocery stores, and my most recent kind of kick butt plan is to buy through Click and Collect at Superstore because they carry quite a few natural foods items and organic items. And I found that using their app literally has chopped 30 to 40% off of my grocery bill because I am only buying what I know fits the meal plan. I don't know if you've seen this app or not. You can just get it on your phone, and basically you can put into the app the things that you want to buy, and you can actually have a running list that is constantly in your app until you actually check out the cart. And so really, when I'm doing that, I'm basically using somebody else's time to shop for it. So usually you have to, in that one, you have to kind of, if you're going to pick it up, you have to do it about a day in advance, and you basically pick it up in a 15-minute time period. And somebody has actually also wheeled it out of the store to your car. You can pay at your car. It has just sliced a ton of grocery shopping time and money for me. And I'm busy. I don't I don't like to fuss really in the grocery store. I am one of those people who will go in and buy stuff that just looks interesting because I like to experiment with food, but it makes the bill huge. And so I'm always amazed at how much less I actually spend doing that. And there's also delivery services now that will pick up pretty much at any major grocery store. One of those in Calgary is In a Buggy, and that is one that actually delivers from Costco. So if you're not a big Costco fan, you don't like the crowd, or you don't like the line, or you don't like the fact that you can really do some serious damage in that store if you're not getting the things that actually are worth going to that store for. You can also use Instacart. That delivers the same day, and that delivers for Superstore as well. Save On Foods also delivers. You can actually also get delivery from Sunterra, but the delivery fee is pretty high. However, you can actually get a Friday night dinner delivered from Sunterra, which is kind of nice. So if there's something that you want a 3-course meal for on a Friday night, you can get them to deliver that to you, which is kind of fun. The grocery link will pick up online orders that you've made at any of many different stores. And so you probably spend about 10 to 20 bucks to get somebody else to do your pickup, but that could be a saver in a short window of time. You know, like I said, when I do the other app, it's usually about a day in advance. And because that's, you have to like be able to pick a time, but you can actually get somebody same day. So if you're really busy and you need some assistance in this is actually can make your life a lot easier. It's because if you get your grocery shopping down to an art, you're really going to reap the benefits in your meal planning. And I have heard protests about like other people selecting your food for you, and well, they do a good job. But honestly, I've never really been disappointed with the people who do the shopping for me. And maybe it's just because I'm so grateful somebody else is doing it. But I've always seen good fruits and vegetables being packed in my cart. And so I think you might find that that's actually really useful. And like I said, if you do your things in advance, like you plan a couple things in advance, it's extremely useful. So let's look at the next reason to do food prepping. Obviously, it's a little healthier, made a little easier. So the current standard diet of most Canadians is composed of primarily processed food like stuff. And I'm hoping that not as many of you have these habits. I'm pretty sure you don't. But if you do, moving away from things that you can't find in nature is an excellent health strategy. And cooking at home can really help you to make sure you're doing just that. And as I mentioned before, it takes a lot of time and energy to cook meals every day. I mean, most people choose to find the easiest option when they're tired at the end of the day. And unfortunately, this can even just be fast food that's brought home on, quickly. But the art of meal prepping really does fix this problem for the most part. If you have good food that you want to eat available at home, it's actually the more convenient option. And you don't want to have to stop somewhere to get takeout or wait in line when you have a better and easier option available. So you'll naturally begin to eat healthier as you're not relying on eating out being the easy route. Plus, you have full control of what you're prepping, rather than just ordering something when you're at your hungriest. And we tend to make interesting food choices when we're the hungriest. So meal prepping actually has gained a lot of exposure in the health field, often through like bodybuilders and fitness people. However, it's definitely not limited to only those focused on their physique. It just, makes sense. So unless you're weighing your food out at every meal, it's likely that you're eating more than you need. And thankfully, if you prepare your food ahead of time, it actually does promote portion control because you're way less likely to pack an oversized dinner when you're like not hungry and making up your prep meals. The average North American has experienced a 23% increase of daily calories between the years of like 1970 and I think the last year in that state was like 2010. That's over 500 more calories per day. And I don't know about you, but I grew up being told to finish my plate. And it wasn't until medical school that I realized I was not going to be a bad girl for leaving the food unfinished. I remember studying with my friends to a place where we ate huge salads, and the salad that I got was massive. And I just remember spending like an hour trying to eat this salad For me, there were lots of stories about starving in the war. My parents' families were immigrants. And then the next story is about children starving in Africa, which were used to motivate eating. And so that's not the best messaging for sure. And a lot of us are going to actually have those negative mental ticker tapes in our heads. So it's great if you can kind of pre-pack a meal that's a bit smaller. In addition, most of us are really not that great at listening for when our body says we're full. Lots of people are emotional eaters and comfort eaters. And, there's other times that we can talk a little bit more in detail about that. But sometimes we just need a little bit more limitation. And sometimes if you get to the end of a bowl, you get to the end of the bowl. So as we're going to see in a minute, most people are not really designing meals properly for metabolic stability and health. But if you use meal prepping to box up meals in separate containers to take along with you, it can really help to tame that overeating as a whole. And it makes you more conscious of accurate serving size, I think. And this in itself pretty much can lead to a much healthier weight control, weight maintenance. So research has been proving the strain of always making decisions and what that actually does to our brain. When we're too overstimulated with choices, and our brains actually become exhausted trying to keep up. So behavioral psychologists have focused specifically on the concept of willpower. And willpower is kind of explained to work like a muscle. So as you use it a lot, it begins to fatigue. And so, this kind of explains why people often choose to splurge on foods that don't work for them late at night. In other words, like when their willpower muscle is just exhausted, and if you haven't eaten properly, or if you're feeling stressed out, these are things that people tend to get a little bit in trouble with. So again, this is where meal prepping can come in, because if you have a proper meal sorted out, it can really spare that willpower and that decision-making muscle, and basically, improve upon the function of your brain. So you're going to prevent decision fatigue by only having a couple of options at a time, and you're way less likely to cave into last-minute choices that you might not otherwise have made. So I just want to point out the Short Stack cookbook that's actually shown in the picture on this page. This is a cookbook that takes ingredients and shows you multiple ways to cook that ingredient. And it's quite an inspiring cookbook that you might enjoy exploring. I was happy to see that they actually had that, that book in the picture when we got these pictures on the internet. So let's look at another reason for meal prepping. And this is actually environmentally conscious eating. So not just organic here, but basically, like in the broader sense, Canada is one of the biggest food wasters on the planet. There was a Commission for Environmental Cooperation, which is a watchdog agency, that found that from farm to table, about 396 kilos of food annually are wasted or lost per person. We actually only eat just short of 2,000 pounds per year. So that's a waste of a lot. That's compared with about 415 kilograms in the United States and 249 kilograms in Mexico. So it gives you a sense we're pretty close to the Americans in this. So food is considered lost when it's spilled or spoiled before it reaches its final destination. So there's lots of different reasons why this can happen. There could be shipping difficulties or produce quality difficulties. It's a bit of an art to get produce into a truck and send it 1,600 kilometers. The average group of fruits and vegetables, and I don't know if any of you have ever gotten, I think it's spud boxes that we used to get, and they actually used to publish on average how many kilometers they trucked what they had in the box. And of course the goal was to reduce the amount of trucking. But sometimes it's even more marked. If you're not conscious of that, some of the things that you're seeing in the grocery store can come from very far away, especially in the wintertime when we have to truck everything in. But it poses a significant food wastage challenge. And this is one of the impulses behind eating more locally, is you're actually reducing food waste across the whole system. So that waste obviously has economic cost. I think other studies have pegged it at about $30 billion a year. It creates about 21 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions largely from like landfills, but by far the largest part of the waste comes from consumers. So every Canadian on average tosses away 170 kilograms of food a year. It's a huge amount. So if you look at the Americans, the American Chemistry Council says that the average United States household throws away about $640 worth of food per year, and more than half of all households throw out food every week. So fortunately, planning your meals also helps prevent excess food waste, and hopefully you won't be throwing away 170 kilos of food a year. And having your food prepped will not just fill your plate more than you can eat, but you won't forget about your leftovers you had in the fridge from the other night if you do it right. So good thing there's a solution for this kind of problem that's much broader than just in our kitchens. So the benefits of pre-planning and preparing your meals pretty much, hopefully, sell themselves. So let's go through some of the steps that you can take to get things started. And again, remembering that you don't have to get everything perfect. These are ideas to help start you on the right path. I want you to try and think about things that you can easily start doing instead of thinking, you have to kind of use like my whole complete system for how I might do it, because everybody's going to be a little bit different. So first thing I think that's a useful idea is to know your inventory in your own house. So figure out an inventory system for what you have and then use it, especially for things that you keep in your cupboards and in the freezer, even in your fridge. Lots of people have no idea what's in their fridge. And this is a really great place to start with meal prep, because you can kind of start to clean out stuff that maybe you forgot you had and figure out what you have in reserve that you can still make use of. My old system for doing this included like sticky whiteboards that stuck to the freezer or the inside of a cabinet. And so then without opening the freezer, I could remember what was in there. And if I took something out, I could wipe it off the list or write it on if I was putting it in. Or alternatively, I have printed out lists of things that I normally want to keep in hand and then put it in a plastic sleeve and then just cross them out as you use them with dry erase pen. And then you can use that list as a basis for your grocery shopping where you know exactly what you have. So I actually use a version of this system in the dispensary for when we run out of things, because it's a super easy and quick list maker to get the orders done at the office too. So nowadays, I actually have a couple of pantry apps that work well for keeping track of what's in the cabinet and freezer. And I've gone through a couple of them over the years. There's the No Waste Food Inventory, which is one. There's a couple that are called iPantry. Actually, there's more than one called iPantry. And if you're super lazy, but you just want to start, you can use Pantry Photo. This is an actual app which just lets you store a picture of your fridge and like your cabinets. And some of them are actually, that particular one even lets you keep track of expiry dates because it takes a high resolution photo. And if you have your like things turned the right way, it'll actually keep track of what the expiration is, which I think is awesome and mildly hysterical. And for some reason, you haven't totally planned a dinner and you're somewhere where you have your phone and you have those pictures, you can just kind of take a quick flip through those pictures that you made and just figure out like what's in the cabinets and freezer when you're at work and start to be able to think of something you can make when you get home if you didn't have something pre-planned. And so sometimes that makes a pretty easy thing. You can also keep a record of meals that you've made for the freezer to pull out as needed. I will often do that as well. Like if I make something that I really like and I'm freezing it, I keep a note of how many of those things I have and also the dates that I put them in. So, and don't forget that inventory includes the things that you like need to make things too. Like, which spices do you have? Or like, do you have enough canned tomato sauce or coconut milk if you cook with that? Which oils do you have? Do you have enough like miso or, some of those kinds of ingredients that you might use little bits of, but you don't base an entire meal around them. And so there's a question here about, do you have access to a sheet like this one? Yeah, I totally do. I will put it up with with the other list stuff. Thank you for that question. So next step, is Container Fiesta. Oh, you can't see me. It didn't say Fiesta. It got cut off there. So that says Container Fiesta, just so you know. Fiesta in our house means like something super fun to do, like eat Mexican food. So we often have meal nights that are called Mexican Fiesta. It's not just Mexican dinner anymore. So a good step in food prep is to get containers and things that you're going to use to store food totally organized. There is nothing more frustrating than not having enough containers when you finish sorting out your prepped ingredients or meals. And airtight seal containers can really help you in the fridge or the freezer. They keep things way fresher, way longer. They're easier to organize. I'm a super big fan of the glass ones because I like to use those safely to reheat. I don't own a microwave anywhere in the office or at home. And so we have little convection ovens for reheating, or at home, I use the big convection oven to reheat. Obviously, you can also use bags like freezer bags or snack bags and commercial plastic containers. You do need to try to minimize the amount of air in a container for the best storage. So usually you want kind of a max of a 1/2 inch at the top, especially if you're going to put something in the freezer, because you don't want much air exposure that tends to create freezer burn and discoloration and weird tastes. But if you leave about a 1/2 inch, you'll have just enough room for expansion, because some things that freeze typically expand. So if it's full, you will otherwise bust your container. And if you don't have the potential to suck air out of a container, then, a freezer bag might actually be better. And just a little note here that freezing bags on a tray in the freezer at first helps save space, because things kind of are much more stackable than just throwing them in. And it usually makes the labels more legible so that they don't get all smushed up. This is just hard-won knowledge from throwing things in my freezer over the years. Obviously, it's important to use containers that are BPA-free and freezer safe. And like I said, if you use a microwave, get ones that are also microwave safe. I'd hazard a guess that most good quality containers nowadays are safe, but check your old ones to make sure they don't have nasty stuff in them. And the general rule is that the softer the plastic is, the more likely you are to get plastic compounds into your food. And that includes plastic wrap, which ideally would not be in direct contact with your food for an extended period. And you should not reheat in plastic wrap, please. Those kinds of materials should be marked with safety labels, and certainly like the bowls and things like that should actually have good safety labels underneath them. So if you have enough containers, food prep is definitely easier. I also find that my label maker has helped me a lot, because sending containers hither and yon with children and partners makes them easy to identify, and that way I don't lose as many. And you can buy like Avery labels that are reusable and that can stay on in the freezer. I think it's Avery 2102. They're little round things that you can laser label, and then you can actually move them. Like if you keep the little sticker sheet that you can put them on, you can just reuse them on things. So if there's something that you often make, and you can just take the label off the thing that you took out of the freezer, and you can use that even part as your inventory system, like meaning like that you used it and that you want to make it back up again. And then you can stick them back on, and yay, Bob's your uncle. You've got your stuff still all labeled nicely. So any kinds of containers, the more the merrier. And obviously you want ones that stack. I mean, the one argument against the glass lock ones is they're kind of deep. So most of them are deep, and they stack perfectly fine, but they take up a little bit more space, than bags. So it just depends on your personal preference. I certainly put big packages of soup in large freezer bags when I don't have a big enough container. So like I said before, I just want to kind of like do a little cursory health sweep on what the best proportions for diet probably are. Now, if you were a member of Start Here, Start Now, that was our big 18-part webinar series on the stuff I personally think you need to know about how to maintain your health. You will remember that during our segment on diet, I made a generalization about what the healthiest diet backed by research actually was composed of worldwide, without taking into account individual genetics, which obviously we can do when we personalize diets for you. So this figure on the right-hand side is the picture of this diet. So what you can see is it's 50% non-starchy vegetables to the right. So it's like half the plate. 25% high quality protein and fat as a combination. So that's the upper left. 12% fruit, 12% starchy vegetables and whole grains. So that's like potatoes, pasta, rice, anything that you have as a grain. 1% fermented foods, which is kind of blown up there as a picture because I couldn't fit it into the dinner plate look there. And then 1% salt and seaweed. That's a very nice mixture for healthy diet components. Of course, I'm not including here like what might be added in spices and stuff like that, but just generally speaking as macronutrients, this is what you want to see. Now, if you look in contrast to the dinner plate shown on the left, this is a typical composition for many families and restaurants where we actually see like probably about a quarter starch and about a quarter vegetables and about a half meat and fat or protein and fat. And this is very typical. Most of us have come to expect meals that actually look a lot more like that. It's just not the healthiest diet. So in meal prep, when you look at it from this perspective, cooking vegetables is super key, and it's worth doing in bigger batches that you can store. And what I found is, you can flavor your vegetables so easily by roasting them, coating it with various spices, tossing with various oils and vinegars as a finishing step. And pretty much all veggies keep pretty well for a week as long as they're in airtight containers in the fridge. And of course, in the freezer, they will last longer. So also in Start Here, Start Now, we talked about putting greens under a meal. So like literally putting salad greens under your dinner to make a more vegetable rich meal. So if you're struggling to figure out how to add more vegetables in, but you don't mind salad, and especially the ones that are a little bit more dark and leafy, then that's another way to improve on the vegetable richness of your meal. I think also it's a great idea to run some of your favorite meals through a calorie counter, like a composition and a calorie counter. You really need to know sometimes how much fuel you're taking in. And that's really important in managing an ideal weight because, you could go all the way and make these beautiful meals that are just like big hunks of meat. And I'm not against meat. I have definitely been vegetarian. And, but at present time, I'm not the hugest meat eater, but at the same time, I think, you have to kind of be reasonable about what actually works the best health wise. And so you can still make your favorites, but you got to learn to combine them with elements that are actually going to buffer sometimes, the intense caloric value and intense amount of compounds that are usually relatively rare in nature. So most people I see in the clinic with weight problems aren't eating foods generally that are unhealthy. They're just eating way too much. On average, when I get people to do a diet diary for me that are struggling to lose weight, they're eating like easily, sometimes like double what they should be eating because they just have no clue that, certain things, even if they're healthy, are super high calories, super high, in fat. And you need calories and you need fat, but you need them proportionately. So just because something has good nutrition doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a limit on the amount that you eat. Nuts is another great example. We're making lots of things out of nuts more recently, and that's fine. However, it can't be 100% of your plate. So sometimes we just kind of have to rethink that. So that's just a little plug for learning more about what actually works best. And if you're interested in learning more about those processes and Start Here, Start Now, we actually, like I said, went through many, many major topics. And you can actually find those on the WLM Learning site. So there's a link to that from Whole Life Medicine, but it's also WLM-learning.com. Now, next up, I think what you want to try to do is play with your food a little bit. So this is actually a couple of pictures of my son, and we're at home here making our own bits and bobs. So this is a picture of him with a white beet that came in our CSA. He was extremely excited to see a white beet. It was like a very happy summer picture I think that was from last year. And we made many yummy things out of the white beets. And then also to the left here, you can see that he is making his famous fish tacos from scratch there. So Well, I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a sec. But basically, what you want to do is you want to make a list of staple dishes that you love making and you really love to eat. And I'd actually aim for about 20 to 30 items. I mean, of course, you're not necessarily going to have all 20 to 30 items pre-prepped. I mean, you could if you were really ambitious. But I think make a list of things that you know that you really like and it's, find them relatively easy to make, or you have a tradition of making them in your family, something that you know that you can make components of or full meals of. And if you're not that prolific in the recipe department, that's okay too. We just want to have a list of things that you know that you and your family like and will eat. And of course, if you can make it work under best diet proportions, that's even better. So then once you have a list of the things that you really, that you and your family are going to be okay with eating, then you can make a list of what you need to have to make those things. So if it's something you really like, you might want to buy enough to make it 2 or 3 times over so you can freeze it or store it for later. And if it's a new thing, maybe you'll make it once first so you can see how much you like it. If you're famous for a dish, you can find a friend to bulk cook with. I am, for example, quite famous for my lasagna, and everybody wants to eat that when I pull it out of the freezer. Nobody has noticed that it is rice pasta, and barely everybody has noticed that I pack a ton of greens in it. So I have found ways of sneakily putting things into the food that are a bit healthier. And so that is something that when I make it, I will usually make a quite large tray because obviously we can't eat all of it, and it freezes super well. So season is going to have a big impact on when you select, because obviously there's different cooking options available to us at various times of the year. Like in summer, we have outdoor or grilling. And so we might want to have things on hand that are, obviously we're going to grill more if we want. And in wintertime, things that go better in a slow cooker, cooked up things are much better. Hot meals are obviously way more popular in winter. Most frozen items are going to last, at least 4 months to stay fresh in the freezer if they're kind of delicate things, and about 10 months if it's something robust like a stew. So, I know a lot of the time something can last over a summer, and you can still have some for the fall if you've made a bunch, in spring when it's still kind of cool out. So I've noticed actually that in this kind of choosing items way, most people struggle in the cooking skills department. And I think that people often think everything has to follow a recipe perfectly to be really edible, but it's not necessarily true. You've got to give yourself permission to experiment, and there are going to be things that you're not going to be a super big fan of, and that's okay. Live and learn, move on to the next thing. But there's going to be lots of times where you come across something that everybody really seems to like, and then you can add that to your item list. Sometimes during the meal prep process, you can also figure out where your cooking skills are the weakest. And I personally think that the mark of a good cook is learning timing. So how to make everything come out ready and not overdone or underdone all at once. And that is the same if you're pulling stuff out of the freezer and assembling things too, right? So certain flavors also don't hold up really well to cooking at length. So if you have somebody who's overcooked something, you can lose the beautiful tastes of it if you cook things too long. And freezing is similar. Sometimes freezing will take certain flavors out, and you have to actually add some of those flavors back in after something is defrosted or almost cooked. Like great examples of that would be like lemon zest or fresh green herbs or toasted nuts. Certain things, they just don't quite make it through food preservation processes. But if you have a little bit of those things on hand, you can kind of zip them in at the end. Green peas are another great example. You can put green peas and cook them into a stew and reheat it. But it's just as easy to have organic green peas in the freezer and toss a cup of those in while you're reheating something. The taste is just totally different. And sometimes people will have trouble, because they make something in the freezer and it just doesn't turn out as well. But these are some of the reasons why. So if you can think about what things would have those nice volatile oils and those crisp, fresh tastes to them, or those toasted tastes to them, those are things that you want to actually add after you have defrosted something, or at the end stages of a meal. So now, of course, it's super fun to think up of new things to eat. I find it fun. I don't know. I don't think everybody finds it fun necessarily, but I'm a big fan of Epicurious, which is a recipe app. And that app will also let you plug in some of the ingredients that you have on hand and suggest recipes that have those things in the meal. You can also use the app called Plan to Eat. There's also one called Food Companion, and that takes the things that you have in the pantry and will actually generate recipes based on what you have on hand. So obviously, the art of meal prepping can take you out of your comfort zone when it comes to, planning and eating, at least at first. But, the library has amazing amounts of cookbooks. I don't know if you all are library people, but going to the library and just there's just rows and rows of them. You don't even have to look up a specific food type. You could just stand in the row because they organize it by subject, and just see kind of what inspires you when you pick it up. My son has his own cookbook or two, and sometimes he's also inspired to try something himself. And so you can involve your family in this and see what kind of things that kind of appeal to them and involve them in that process. Of course, he claims his fish tacos are the best. I have my own version of fish tacos. Thank you very much. And I think it's also fun to make meals together. It also takes some of the tedium out of it, even if not everything is prepped in advance. So now that you know a whole bunch of grocery secrets about getting your stuff home, so once you get the things you ordered up, you're going to want to make a cook now, usually in a cook later pile. I am a huge fan of cooking up handy basics kind of once a week and keeping them in the fridge or the freezer, even if they're not complete meals. And I don't always put complete meals in the freezer unless I know I'm going to head into a time frame where I'm not going to have enough time. So at my house, especially in cooler weather, we make one soup per week. So Sunday's soup was Hungarian paprika cabbage soup, which is my personal favorite. I don't know if it's everybody's personal favorite. Typically, we'll also make 1 to 2 batches of cooked whole grains. So we'll use that on the side, or we'll put it, within a salad or within another dish. A batch of beans of some type will often go up. And then we also sometimes boil a few eggs and keep them in the fridge. And usually I'll make a batch of some sort of cooked meat, so something that I already have cooked up, and then something that I might maybe not cook up but have in the fridge for the week, like a big fish. There's certain things that are especially easy to use this way, like chicken is one great thing that you can pre-cook. And I'm going to attach the best chicken cooking recipe that I have to put in the fridge handout to this presentation, because it just really takes maybe 20 minutes and it cooks them perfectly for having things on salad and reheating, and they keep in the fridge pretty much the whole week. I'm also a Sunday dinner girl, and so typically we might have a whole roast, like a whole roast chicken or whole roast fish, and leftovers can become the base of the week's soup. Or I will use veggie leftovers if there are any, because veggies seem to go fast in my house, which is good. But you can also use them as a base or accoutrement for soup. So sometimes if I am making a soup, I just look at if there's any other leftovers that I have from the week that haven't gotten gobbled up, and I will put those in my soup. So we don't really waste a lot. I'm personally also a big fan of using tofu in a meal. And firm tofu cubes can easily be used to give a meal more heft. And if you can marinate them, this is the advantage of those. I mean, just using plain tofu doesn't taste like very much, but you can actually marinate them. You can marinate them in a bag in the fridge. They'll last quite a while. And then you can just roast the cubes in the oven. And then if you have it already roasted and after you marinated it, you can freeze it, or you can keep it in the fridge, and you can add those things in if you need just a little bit more heft to something that's more vegetable based. Now, obviously, people have obviously talked about washing and cutting a lot of things in advance. And that's all okay. But I don't cut everything up personally. Most of the stuff that I've bought in bulk and that might go bad if I don't deal with it quickly, or things that my peeps won't eat unless I already have it cut up and available. Like if I buy a fresh pineapple, there aren't too many members of my household that will cut that up on their own. So I'd usually cut that up and stick it in a container in the fridge where it's obvious, because it goes in the place where the containers go. And so people are trained in the house to look for those things in that way. Most vegetable and fruit storage, though, like a lot of the fruits and vegetables, will come in bags or packaging that actually is designed somewhat to keep it a bit more fresh. Like they'll have holes to let off gas, like ripening gases. And there's certain things actually that don't do really great in the fridge. Like if you actually refrigerate them, it makes them taste worse, or it makes them like be a little bit destabilized, like apricots, avocados, bananas, and kiwis. If you put those in the fridge, they tend to dehydrate and get kind of brown on the inside. Same with like mangoes and papayas, peaches. Those things should really kind of be kept out and then use them up as they're ripening. Putting them in the fridge actually doesn't improve them at all. And then, certain things, I personally store tomatoes on the counter because, of course, we grow our own tomatoes. We have a little greenhouse in the back because they taste so dramatically different than the ones at the store. And I can only do that for so many months of the year, but they actually are much better on the counter at room temperature. You can really make things taste weird if you actually use things that we just take for granted. People just take for granted you're supposed to put everything in there. So eggs, like I said, eggs can be pre-cooked, and if people enjoy eggs and they're not sensitive to them, which it's quite possible, but lots of people are sensitive to those things, you can easily find ways to meal prep with eggs. Like I said, boiling them and keeping them in the shell in the fridge. You can keep them for a good length of time, and obviously they're ready to go. And you can bind them with other things. You can put them in salads. You can mix them into a meal pretty easily, or you can make a meal just of that with something else on the side. So you can also make little quiches that freeze well and that you can heat up for breakfast. So it's super great. I'm sure everybody likes eggs. Some people that I know like egg burritos in the morning. It's not my favorite thing, but if you have some of those on hand and you chop them up, you can easily make an egg burrito. It tastes pretty good for those of us who like it. Another great meal prep thing you can do is for smoothies. And all you have to do is pick up a couple of your favorite fruits and greens of choice. You chop them up, place them in freezer bags until you're ready to blend them, really. So as long as you go through them relatively quickly and you use a good container, they keep really easily. And it's also a pretty good way to rescue fruit that's just about to go off. If you catch it and you freeze it right away and then you blend it into smoothie, it's usually okay. Remembering that veggie content should far outweigh fruit content in a smoothie. A fruit-only smoothie is just too big of a calorie hit for the day most of the time. It's just too much sugar. And a little bit of protein powder can be great for smoothies also. And that's also an ideal place to put a whole food supplement powder. Be a bit careful with the avocado fat bombs. Sometimes people like to put tons of avocado in smoothies. Again, totally, you need the fat. It's awesome. But you just really should not be liquefying 2 or 3 avocados a day. There's so many options. Seeds like chia or flax that store really well in the fridge. I usually put the seeds in the fridge. They'll last a lot longer, especially if they're ground. And really, that can make a filling, delicious little quick meal, whether or not it's for breakfast or a snack. Now, another great thing for food preppers is the magic slow cooker. I absolutely love my slow cooker. So it can be a really major helper because you can cook things during the day when you're not at home. So stews and soups and slow cooked meats. Plus, if yours is as big as mine, there's always leftovers. So dig out that old crock pot and find some great recipes. Nowadays, of course, we also have the Instapot becoming more popular. And that's still a pretty high volume for making extras. And it really has the bonus aspect of being a pressure cooker. So it speeds the cooking of things up amazingly. So it can really help people pressed for time. Like it can reduce it by 60% easily. So my favorite all-time slow cooker recipe is actually an African-inspired chickpea beef stew. And it's so lovely on a cold night. I will try my best to see if I can put that recipe into our things. But if you're in the habit of using a slow cooker, There's so many books that you can get now that just have amazing slow cooker recipes. And the one wonderful thing about that is it's hot and ready when you get home. The only, I think, piece that it doesn't work always so well is if you want more than one component. I've only ever seen a handful of slow cookers that have like two compartments in them if you have two things that you need to slow cook. You can also put your rice cookers on timers or, again, just make sure you have something else that's on the side of that. Now, another thing that I think works really well for prep is mason jar salads. So obviously, super nutrient filled, easy to prepare, and totally customizable. So there's so many things you can put on a salad to change it up, and these can really be made ahead of time really easily as soon as you bring the groceries home, and they can be really beautiful. So mason jar salads are exactly what they sound like. They're layered salad ingredients stacked in a mason jar with a cap. And you can go about this process in a couple of ways. You can divvy out your individual jar salads right away, or just prepare like all the ingredients to be ready for assembly. But if you have a situation where you can bring a jar, some schools are not super thrilled about glass jars, but you can just basically begin to layer with the dressing on the bottom, and then the thick or the hard things like cabbages or carrots, and then softer veggies and beans, and always putting the greens on top. So the reason why you refrigerate it that way and you bring it that way is that you'll do the least damage to the produce. And so there's so many different ways of doing it, but you could do things like hummus and red onion with carrots and chickpeas and quinoa and mixed greens, or balsamic dressing with apples and feta and mixed greens and pecans, or an avocado dressing with tomato and barbecue chickpeas and quinoa. Or my personal favorite, I love salads with purple cabbage in them. I'm not really sure. Cabbage is the theme for me, I guess. And you could do it with black beans and quinoa and sweet potatoes that have some, taco seasoning on them with mixed greens. And of course, if you do your mason jar salads like this, you can also just make them this way and whip them out for dinner too. So and all the stuff will already be cooked up. And this is really, really useful if you have kids maybe who are not super confident about cutting things. So because it's all prepped up for them, and they can just dump it in a big bowl and help you to get dinner ready. Obviously, the efforts towards meal prepping can totally add up. So even if you're not ready to go all out next Sunday, there's some pretty simple changes you can add to your routine now, which is double up on your dinners so you have leftovers as meals or that you can freeze. Begin to chop up produce if you're bringing something home in a big batch, if you're planning to cook it soon. Start buying your staple ingredients in bulk. Make a big soup or make a big stew and see how long it can last you. Cook your grains all at once, like your quinoa or brown rice, and refrigerate it, because that takes so much time. If you can do one batch of that, and it takes 40, 50 minutes, and you made enough, then you can use that over the course of the week instead of having to try and recook that every single time. There are just so many different ways to incorporate a little food prep into your routine, and I'm absolutely sure that you'll totally reap the benefits from that. So obviously, we're going to want to start to get prepping right now. And I just see that Neil has a recommended cookbook there. I hope everybody can read it. I'll stick that too on the page, Neil. That's a great suggestion. It's really helpful when people learn how to make things that clearly go together. So thanks so much for taking the time to learn more about Art of Meal Prep. And I have to admit how shocked I was, like how many people signed up for tonight. It was well over 60 people that was signed up just off our patient list alone. So I had no idea you were also into food. So if there is something else that you need to know, or you need more details about, I'm happy to do further lectures in this area. Just post them to us on Facebook or email us at info@resonance-wellness.com. I'm here to support your health journey. So what I can do in these hours can be hopefully enough that you're starting to get much better ideas about how to keep yourself healthy. And that's really the goal here. So obviously we covered a ton. Hopefully you're not too overwhelmed. And just learning how to do meal prep is going to make a big difference. So hopefully these suggestions are just what you need to get started. So here's the next events in the series. You can register in advance, like I said, lifemedicine.com. So it's -life-medicine.com. That's our resource site. I'm going to plan to do a live event in October for the more curious community members that really already have an established health, moving into align events. So this is a little bit more complex than some of the Alleviate things that we learn as basics. So during these events, we're going to just have more time together to learn and experiment and practice new skills in person and health. And the theme is going to be reconnecting pathways. Next month, we're going to do overlooked causes of low thyroid. This is a very popular topic in clinic and otherwise. And so hopefully you'll be able to join me for that. And you can see that we've also planned arthritis and energy and metabolic reset for the beginning of the year, and digestive disorders and sleep for the beginning months of next year. If you have kids, you might want to check out the Nurture Natural Care some webinars for parents. So I'm not doing as many of them because there's lots of courses that I've done over the years for parents that we are putting on our WLM learning site, so that because it's hard to get so many parents together in a room like it once was. We're all webinar based now. So hopefully you'll have a chance to take a look at some of those things. So other than that, thank you very much again for showing up. This replay will be available on our Whole Life Medicine site, and I'll also make sure to email you personally with the resource sheet. So have a wonderful evening, take care of yourselves, and I'm looking forward to hearing about all the things that you're going to make starting next week in your meal prep. Take care, guys. Bye. Thanks for watching. I love to connect to my patient community to inform and inspire, and I hope you'll join us again in the near future. Don't forget to check out whole-life-medicine.com for more webinars and events.